Awesome stuff. I think we can go ahead and get started here. But thanks so much everyone for joining. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Zach. I head up the partnerships team and growth here at Northbeam. This session is meant to be a working conversation for marketers trying to make sense of cross-channel measurement in 2026, not just a product pitch. You're going to be hearing from some of these great platforms up here. You can tell by their logos, but Mountain, Meta, Pinterest, Snap, TikTok, and Vibe. A bunch of familiar faces for me, all of my friends all in one room on one webinar. But you're going to be hearing a lot from these platforms that sit across performance, discovery, social, and TV. And the goal today is to talk honestly about how people actually buy media today and how measurement needs to evolve to reflect that reality. So, quick bit of context before we dive in. I think many of you are aware of what we do over here, but just to set the stage a little bit, Northbeam is a marketing intelligence platform built to tie media exposure back to real conversions, not just cookie-based attribution or modeled assumptions. And that's really important today because everything we'll talk about, clicks, views, deterministic views, CTV, discovery, ultimately comes down to this one key question: what actually influenced the purchase? So here's how we're going to spend our time today. First and foremost, we're going to set the context on clicks and deterministic views. Yes, it's a little bit of a mouthful, but we're going to go over why we built it and really the purpose of it. Then we're going to move into a roundtable discussion for each individual platform, and this is supposed to be conversational, so we're going to loop in other platforms and try to get their take. And then we'll leave time at the end for Q&A, especially around the setup, what recommended windows, and how to interpret what changes when you actually turn on this new attribution model. So why this matters today? I think this slide really frames the problem we're here to solve. Clicks tell part of the story, but not the complete picture. We've known that since the longest time. I think here at Northbeam, we're pretty anti last click. Our whole value as a platform is trying to prove out where initial demand is generated. And joined today by a lot of these platforms are very focused on driving net new demand. Um, some of the most important channels today are built for seeing and remembering, not just clicking, especially not just the last click. Add in some of the privacy changes, signal loss, and what happens is pretty consistent. Upper funnel channels get undermeasured, then they get underfunded, and then eventually they get underscaled. Clicks plus deterministic views exists to close that gap. And this is especially important for scaling upper funnel channels that generate net new demand, especially building awareness ahead of Q4 and Black Friday, Cyber Monday. We're seeing year over year brands scale upper funnel spend early and earlier. And this has been incredibly impactful to creative testing and scaling new creative types, video creative that don't necessarily drive a ton of clicks. So um, getting into a little bit more at a simple level of what clicks and deterministic views does. And for the rest of the webinar, we're going to primarily refer to this as CDV. But at a simple level, CDV does three things. First and foremost, it keeps clicks exactly where they are. Nothing is taken away from that deterministic hard click data that we've been tracking ever since Northbeam's inception. But the second piece is we're actually adding verified view events from all of these platforms using first-party data and order and user matching. So matching on both order IDs, order joins, as well as hashed email address to ensure that we're not just modeling out impressions, but we're actually tying each of these impressions and incorporating them into our attribution modeling. And then third, it reconciles back to real orders. So upper funnel exposure shows up in the same system as search, social, influencer, email, SMS, and so on. So everything we're doing is entirely deduplicated. We're not just adding in additional view through credit. I think that's a big thing that I see in my day-to-day with a lot of our agency partners. A lot of agencies have always believed in some level of view through attribution. However, I think where it gets confusing is a lot of times those view through lift metrics are duplicated revenue. So it'll just be a lift on top of additional revenue. Everything within Northbeam we're deduplicating. So the views are typically taking credit away from things like organic search or direct visits to the website. And then a little bit more on our actual credit philosophy. So one important thing to call out before we talk about each individual platform here is that this model is additive, not duplicated. Clicks, again, still count as full weight. Views add the missing context, and credit can flow across platforms where the paths show it should. So this is going to be including views not only just from one platform in a siloed view, but it's going to be fully deduplicated across publisher. So someone could view a meta ad, then they could view a Vibe or Mountain CTV ad, and then they convert off a TikTok ad, Pinterest ad, Snap ad, and so on. You get the gist. We're incorporating all of these impressions from all of these various platforms alongside our click data. But how do we keep this fair? So I wanted to provide a quick word on the actual safeguards here. So views here are pooled at the platform level. More views don't necessarily mean more credit per view. And there's protections that exist against view flooding and dilution. We wanted to make sure that platforms didn't have the ability to stuff the ballot box, so to speak. But I wanted to also call out that within this attribution model was trying to find a client that had several of these platforms. But I wanted to show that from a last touch world to clicks and deterministic views, there's quite a big lift in terms of attributed revenue that's being shifted. And a lot of this is being shifted away from anonymous or lower funnel traffic, direct brand search, organic search, and so on. All of your hard click data on your social platforms and paid media platforms are still going to remain the same. Awesome. And that's a good segue to get into some of our platform sessions. So I want to kick things off with Meta. And we recently just released a 2025 year in review report that the team put together. And across all the platforms, we actually saw Meta, which already was at about a 63% share of wallet across Northbeam advertisers. We saw spend go up about 10.5% and one-day revenue up nearly 7%, which really reinforces why Meta remains the backbone of performance for so many of our brands. So many of Northbeam customers are still very Meta dependent. And at the same time, how that impact shows up depends heavily on attribution lens you're using. So really wanted to introduce Cameron here. And can you share a little bit on how Meta is thinking about some of these new attribution models? I know you've been at Meta for quite a while, but what do they mean for some of the brands that operate on your platform today?
Yeah, absolutely, Zach. First, let me say thank you to you and the wider Northbeam team for bringing us together. Always find it valuable to get key players in the ecosystem together for our shared advertisers. But to address your question, so the number one complaint we hear from advertisers is that third-party cross-publisher attribution reporting that they're leveraging today as their source of truth for understanding campaign performance only includes clicks. Advertisers share with us consistently that they know click-only based tools are underrepresenting the true impact of Meta ads on their business outcomes. And at Meta, we know click-only attribution models do not represent the full impact of Meta ads, not only for Meta campaigns, but this is also true across other marketing channels and publishers where our advertisers are also invested. So this is something that we are very heavily invested in and want to solve with partners. So at Meta, we know and firmly believe that we've always had strong view-through performance for advertisers. We also know that one of the key pain points has been that this impact is hard to capture in a lot of the source of truth third-party attribution reporting our advertisers are using because these solutions are heavily reliant on last click attribution or click-only reporting. So ensuring that views are properly represented is key to ensure accurate representation and is why we were so excited to be able to participate in Northbeam's new CDV attribution model. So by enabling deterministic views to Northbeam, this is allowing Northbeam to include these views in their attribution reporting. And this is ensuring that Meta is more accurately represented in Northbeam's reporting and is providing our shared clients an enhanced understanding of Meta's share of credit across the entire purchase journey.
Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome stuff. Also wanted to share quickly a case study that we have up on the board here, but Bessie has been a long-term Northbeam client, key Meta brand, spending a whole lot on Meta. But with Bessie specifically, Meta always looked pretty solid in click-only views, but once deterministic views were included, a much larger share of orders and revenue now became visible. So as you can see here, CDV revealed 47% more orders actually being attributed to Meta and 49% more actual attributed revenue. A lot of this is due to last click and clickbase just not capturing the full picture that we can actually now with this model tie back to those conversions. So Cameron, with that in mind, Meta already accounts for such a huge share of wallet for many of our shared advertisers. But when they turn on CDV and see more credit land on Meta, what actually changes in the room with finance and leadership or the CMO?
Yeah, I think Vessi is a great example of this. I mean, we kind of went from with clicks only model, like maybe we should trim some spend on Meta, or we've kind of reached our diminishing returns to now we're clearly underrepresenting the true impact. And I think for a lot of advertisers like Vessi's, what we're seeing is that this is building trust in the performance reporting that they are delivering to key stakeholders like finance and leadership. So when they are saying that we are going to reallocate dollars or ask for additional investment, they can actually prove it in the reporting that they have. It's inclusive of clicks and views. And then as they continue to make those investments, they can continue to report back on how that actually had an impact on their business moving forward.
Great stuff. And we're going to get to TikTok in just a sec, but I also wanted to ask Mohit here. We were chatting earlier about how you mentioned that undercredited revenue is now also visible in TikTok, but how are you seeing something similar on TikTok when brands layer in deterministic views?
Uh, exactly what Cameron spoke. I think we are seeing the similar metrics. The customer journey is evolving, and I think last click is not cut out to understand the true impact of platforms with high confidence. So I think once we layered in the deterministic view data, advertisers saw substantially higher attributed revenue and ROAS compared to what the last click was able to capture. In some cases, revenue attributed to TikTok grew by more than 3 times, with ROAS lifting in a similar way. I'll be talking more about in that in the further section as well, Zach.
Awesome stuff. And then also wanted to loop in Pierre real quick on the Snap side. From Snap's vantage point here as another social and story-driven platform, how does CDB unlock similar upper funnel recognition, or does it play differently for you and the Snap advertisers?
Yeah, I can only like double or triple down. Like we've seen like very similar stories. The click only story only shows part of the value we delivered. And advertisers have been knowing this. They've been experimenting different solutions. They know views are bringing much more that what the clicks are only saying. And to speak to similar uplift, we've commonly seen times five, times 10 uplift from click to CDV. So it's a game changer. It tells a completely more holistic story, and it basically drive confidence in saying you can invest earlier in the user journey and you'll drive sustainable and actually very growth and very efficient customer acquisition cost.
Great. And yeah, we're going to dive deeper on that when I go into each individual platform. But I think across the board, we see with some of our fastest growing advertisers, they're spending on several different channels, and especially nine-figure brands. A lot of times they're spending on all of these platforms that are joined here. So it's all a part of the customer journey and the ideal channel mix. Now I'm going to segue over to an interesting one, Vibe and Jacob from the Vibe team. This is a very fun one, and actually it can be challenging for us to the lift is actually infinite because coming from a click-based lens, you can't click on your TV. There are some placements with platforms and QR codes and things like that, but the lift is actually infinite for the most part. So before we launched CDV, we actually weren't able to attribute any of these actual conversions on the Vibe side. But CTV is a channel that often disappears, like I said, in these click-based system, even though it plays a meaningful role in the funnel. Jacob, could you talk to us a bit on how Vibe thinks about CDV? A little bit confusing clicks and deterministic views for CTV and what that unlocks for brands trying to treat CTV as a true performance channel.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Zach, for allowing Vibe to be a part of this webinar today. I'm really looking forward to all the cross collaboration that we're going to discuss on this webinar. But yeah, to get into it, why does CDV matter for CTV? So as you mentioned, CDV starts with a click-only baseline and then adds verified view-through exposure on top of that. Those views are not modeled or inferred, and they're deterministic events captured via first-party pixels. They then match that to real orders based on that fractional share that you had mentioned on a previous slide. Why does this matter for TV? Obviously, CTV is inherently view-driven, so we are not click-based. People don't click a TV ad. They watch it and then convert later on another device. So without CTV modeling, media buyers would not be able to rely solely on in-platform attribution. CTV, it actually makes it much more measurable within the same framework as search and social. So this gives advertisers a credible way to evaluate upper funnel media without inflating its impact. It doesn't steal last click credit. It validates the contribution that CTV has on your funnel. This unlocks confidence, confidence to test, confidence to scale, and to compare channels honestly. So when CTV is layered in to that attribution, advertisers can fund discovery media knowing that it's going to be held to that same accountability standard that they've come to rely on with PPC, social, and other non-view-through based mediums. Getting into a case study, which is mentioned right there. So Blindster. Blindster is one of our shared clients. A little bit of background, they make custom shutters, blinds, and shades. Every order is built to spec, shipped direct, and highly sensitive to efficiency. They compete against much larger brands, so attribution clarity is not optional. It's how they stay profitable as a business. So as paid channels scaled and CPMs rose, Blindster needed an objective way to measure impact, especially for view-driven channels like CTV. Blindster is one of the first clients of ours that actually implemented the CDV modeling to evaluate click and view-based performance in one system. With that foundation, they launched Vibe. Their COO, to quote him directly, Oscar Romano, we decided we're not going to use any advertising platform unless it integrates with Northbeam. That's how we found Vibe. That integration allowed them to start small, validate contribution deterministically, and scale that spend with confidence. And the outcome was not just better measurement, it was better business performance. Post-implementation, Blindster achieved a 19% lift in MER, an 11% reduction in CAC, and a 5% improvement in AOV. CTV then moved from an experiment to an accountable growth lever backed by deterministic evidence rather than just in-platform claims. This is really important when we talk about MTA, MMM, incrementality. So CDV combined with those three other levers gives you the most complete scope of how effective CTV ads can truly be across your entire media mix. This is not something advertisers had access to 5 years ago. So the fact that we can actually paint that full picture now is extremely important. One of the things we preach at Vibe is the halo effect of CTV. And the real power of CTV is that it makes a halo effect visible instead of theoretical. So when CTV runs, brand search improves, conversion rates rise, retargeting becomes more efficient, not just on Vibe, but also on Facebook, Meta, Pinterest, TikTok, Snap, all of your channels. Deterministic views show that these downstream conversions were preceded by upstream exposure. So CTV does not exaggerate CTV's role. It explains why bottom funnel channels perform better when upper funnel demand is being created. Together, Vibe and Northbeam give advertisers parity across your entire funnel. Northbeam provides the operating system, one source of truth that reconciles to real revenue, while Vibe delivers CTV with deterministic exposure data that actually plugs directly into that system. The result is accountability without guesswork, confidence over attribution, and the ability to scale CTV based on truth instead of belief. In a world where clicks are no longer the only thing that tell the story, CDV is how advertisers see the full picture, and Vibe and Northbeam is how they act on it.
Awesome stuff. I wanted to double click on the MMM and incrementality and MTA piece together. The focus of today's conversation is definitely on the MTA with this new attribution model, but I personally and the stance at Northbeam, especially with CTV advertising, it's important to have the true measurement trifecta of MTA, MMM, and incrementality. But how do you see that really fitting together? I know you work with a lot of these accounts hands-on, but like how do you see brands actually actioning on all three of these measurement um, ways all in one use?
Yeah, I mean, being able to validate what your campaigns are actually doing, not just in platform, but seeing how it affects your entire mix is so critical when it comes to testing. Advertisers want to test a million different things, and being able to tie MMM, MTA, incrementality all together in just one platform at Northbeam is really how you're going to be able to grow your brand's presence against your competitors.
Yep. I'm bullish on that specifically. I think CDB enables our advertisers to test into CTV before maybe committing to much larger budgets that typically would maybe be better measured with an incrementality test. But I think being able to test alongside their core channels is a big value prop that we're seeing and actually having more like mid-market brands being able to test into CTV for the first time. So very excited for what you guys are doing over on the Vibe side of things. And we're going to get to Pinterest in just a bit, but Olivia, as you hear about Jacob talking about CTV's role in seeding demand, how much of that behavior actually shows up in Pinterest when people move into that inspiration and planning mindset?
Sure. I'm very impressed by your not mixing up CTV and CDV, by the way, for both of you. But to answer your question, we definitely see that behavior as well. People come to Pinterest undecided, but with intent. We actually see 96% of all top searches are unbranded on Pinterest. And our conversion rates are higher than ever, but a lot of those influential moments, such as ad views or idea saves, they don't lead to immediate clicks, meaning the true impact is often left invisible in click-based reporting. So definitely similar view from our side as well.
Awesome stuff. And then I think that's a good segue to one of our amazing other CTV partners, actually our first CTV partner, Mountain. And this is a great point to loop in Lauren here on the Mountain team. And Mountain actually just came off last year a successful IPO. So kudos to their team. But one pattern we consistently see with performance TV is delayed impact and this whole concept of conversion lag from first initial ad exposure to ultimately converting. Conversions often happen days or weeks or even months, and oftentimes through a completely different channel. But Lauren, how is Mountain looking at models like clicks and deterministic views? And how do you want advertisers to think about TV when it's sitting in the same framework as their other performance and core channels?
Yeah, thanks, Zach. And I really appreciate that intro. Super grateful to be here with this group. So thanks to Northbeam for bringing us all together. Also, I'm going to probably confuse CDV and CTV. It's just too close. I don't know why you guys did that to us. But yeah, back to your question. Yeah, I mean, what's really great when you're able to combine clicks and deterministic CTV views is that advertisers are now able to stop treating TV as like this isolated awareness channel that historically has really, been the case, and they can start really measuring it as a performance part of their conversion journey, right? So we already talked about this, and Jacob, made the main point here, right? Our TV ads are not clickable. So when you're looking at a last click model, it's only telling you who got that credit at the very end, right? And we're not able to quantify what influenced that behavior upstream. What's been great about, this CDV attribution model is that those deterministic CTV views lets us see with more confidence when someone sees a TV ad and they're impacted by that ad unit, how does that show up in their overall path to conversion later on, right? Because regardless of the specific tactics that our Mountain customers are employing, with CTV, even the lowest funnel, like re-engagement, retargeting campaigns will never be able to be the last touch point that actually leads to a conversion. More commonly, we're falling mid-funnel or even top of funnel because the nature of CTV is that it influences, right? No matter how impactful the ad is, you'll always have to move to a new device, and you'll have to follow, a journey that will include another touch point, whether that's just, Googling the brand, or whether that's going to the website and then getting, retargeted maybe by a social ad. At the end of the day, that final last click is always going to be another channel. But what's great is now we're able to see, where does TV show up in the journey? And we can finally see, for advertisers who move to Northbeam CDV model, how often are we showing up really early in that journey, and a better understanding of like their overall influence of their TV efforts has been really important. So they no longer have to ask, should I give TV any credit? How much credit do I give them? And instead, they're able to see that positive halo impact and a very clear, very easy validation of not only their existing TV investment, but justifying an increase for more budget channel allocation.
Yep, we see the same thing. I've been getting pretty deep into the data with a lot of our customers and looking into conversion lag within Northbeam, looking at on a backwards looking lens, looking at different windows. Specifically on CTV, we find that on a 1 day window, of course, a lot of the demand is not being captured. Like people aren't immediately seeing a TV ad and buying that same day. However, when we're looking at things on a 3 day, there's a 30% lift, and then a 7 day, there's a 50% lift, and then a 14 day, there's like an 80% lift. And a lot of times CTV actually being the top or one of the top channels on a 30-day basis. So being able to incorporate all of that conversion lag is really what we're bullish on with this new attribution model. Wanted to dive a little bit deeper on another amazing, great case study, MacDougall. But with MacDougall, deterministic views surface TV's influence much earlier in the customer journey through conversions that came later through search or direct. How did that change the way TV was positioned internally with the MacDougall team within their existing performance mix?
Yeah, I love this MacDougall case study. And I love that, we're looking not just at one individual channel, but how did it impact several channels? So TikTok and Mountain CTV, for example, really got to see a new lift. MacDougall, I think, is a lot of advertisers can relate to this, but they were previously relying on GA4. But as their D2C business started to expand, they needed a more clear idea, right, of like what was driving that top funnel new customer acquisition. But they were seeing, like a lot of us have, that in the last few years, with GA4, it's skewing a lot more bottom funnel and really under attributing those top funnel efforts, specifically, video, social. And so it just wasn't useful for them to be making, marketing decisions on. So then the other option is that they have to rely on like individual siloed platform data, which of course, isn't factoring in cross-channel involvement and can require a lot of that like manual reconciliation so that you can actually have deduped information across your marketing mix. That's obviously a heavy lift. So needing that like fair multi-touch measurement tool that could actually be trusted by both their marketing and their finance teams is what Northbeam was able to provide with the CDV model, and also, incorporating the MMM tool as well. And after switching to these models and again, cross-triangulating with MMM, it then reframed TV to be, instead of like this nebulous branding line item that they had before, to more of a demand creation engine with actual true performance numbers to support it. So they were able to see conversions that came through other down funnel channels like you were talking about, which just made it clear that TV was driving the incremental growth at the top of the funnel, not just awareness, but actually impacting the ability for these audiences to then go convert. So I like the actual quote. I think this kind of sums it up nicely from the customer, but they said, without using CDV, we wouldn't have been able to get the CTV channel off the ground. And it's just been a game changer. So that's definitely a similar trend, that we have seen really across all of our advertisers who switch to the clicks and deterministic view model, where they see TV setting the stage and the rest of the channels close the loop, and then allows them to rethink where CTV is living organizationally, not just on the brand budget, but on the performance side as well.
Great stuff. And then lastly, real quick, going a little bit deeper on that, but for a marketer that's brand new to CTV, connected television, what are the first 2 or 3 signals that you tell them to watch for, given that first or during that first month of a mountain test?
Yes. And I love that you brought this up already, because we really encourage our marketers. Obviously, every new advertiser who launches CTV, they want to immediately start looking at sales and revenue. But we really encourage our advertisers to think about that whole sales funnel, and really like include the longer consideration that just is inherent with CTV as a channel. And if you're thinking about CTV kind of at the beginning of the funnel, and those, days, weeks, maybe even months, if it's a longer consideration product, before they actually then decide to go convert, that means that you really do need to be opening up, your view to have a long enough window to get that full ramp up from the beginning of the acquisition touch point to when the actual sale occurs. So that's really the first thing we encourage our brands to think about. And in our platform, we have like a path to conversion report that'll show the specific journey so they can better understand where is Mountain falling in that path. Is it more mid funnel? Is it really, really top of funnel? And how long is that journey typically? So that, encourages our advertisers to really pay attention to where each of their Mountain campaigns fall in the funnel. And then finally, pay attention to your frequency and exposure patterns. We'll often see, especially for a net new audience where we're introducing them to the brand for the very first time with these TV ads, it takes 1 or 2 TV impressions to build that familiarity and intent before someone is going to actually take action, like visit the website, and we can track that as a engagement. So in order to really understand the impact of those early touch points, we want to make sure again that we are giving the campaign long enough to get each of those necessary touch points and exposure patterns. And when you start to view CTV through that more holistic lens and use tools like Northbeam to understand, the bottom funnel impact, I think it makes it a lot more clear and easy to validate the channel and then scale confidently.
Super great tips there. Thank you so much. Now I want to pivot over to the Pinterest team. Also wanted to highlight an amazing metric, again, in our 2025 year in review, an amazing report that we just released. If you're not on our email list, sign up on our website and we can send it over to you. But in that report, we saw spend for Pinterest actually up year over year by 40%. Really signals growing confidence in Pinterest as a channel that drives demand earlier in the funnel. Pinterest lives in that discovery and planning phase, and where impact isn't always immediate, direct response, one-day click conversions. But Olivia, can you share Pinterest perspective on attribution in this environment and how more complete attribution models change the way that brands should evaluate Pinterest's role?
Sure. Thanks, Zach. So this is a critical time for advertisers to, I'd say, revisit their current strategies and evolve with the industry and the changing advertising landscape. The convergence of privacy regulations and AI disruption is really reshaping the rules of digital advertising and measurement. So signal loss from third-party cookies, platform privacy changes, and consumer expectations around data transparency are accelerating. And we know the multiplier effect is real. Brand value acts as an accelerant on activation, but you only capture it when quality impressions and outcome events are attributed accurately on the proper time horizon and when they're connected back into audience building and auction optimization in near real time. The only way to capture the multiplier is a closed loop system of truth that triangulates experiments, MMM, and verified platform signals, revealing where to invest for durable growth. So we recommend building a system of truth, which Jacob touched on earlier as well, because there is no one single source of truth that exists in today's measurement landscape. And we recommend when you are evaluating measurement solutions and tools as part of your toolkit to ensure you're considering, first, are you able to leverage this toolkit to measure the entire funnel and customer journey? So if you're only looking at solutions that only capture the immediate conversion or user action, you're missing out on a much larger opportunity to build a sustainable business focused on both loyal and new customers. Optimizing to immediate ROAS can miss most of the value that accrues over time and to customer LTV. And then we also recommend evaluating whether you can properly quantify the value of the view. Your measurement toolkit should incorporate both clicks and impressions, as we've gone over, but also quantify the quality of the view. So an impression's value changes with who sees it, where they see it, and how they see it. So treat these as multipliers in your measurement and optimization, not as just afterthoughts. The way that people use Pinterest, they use it for inspiration and planning. We are a visual first platform where discovery starts with seeing. A journey often begins with a single image with a lot of upper and mid funnel touch points that fuel demand. People come to Pinterest to be inspired, explore ideas, plan their next purchase well before they're ready to click. We see with our tag data that 88% of our tagged tracked conversions are view-based. So I don't need to go into why traditional last click ROAS undervalues these types of touch points, but why CDV is important is it links both those ad views and clicks to conversions, revealing the impact of awareness and performance campaigns together. So this uncovers conversion value missed by click-only models. We had early proof points from our alpha testing with Northbeam. It showed that there were dramatic lifts for early adopters. So we saw a 552% average conversion lift, 400% revenue lift, and 359% ROAS lift compared to click-only models. So this directionally underscored the undervalued impact of view-based engagement, especially for Pinterest. And then you touched on it as well. We also had the case study with Omnilux. We recommend when you are using CDV with Pinterest to utilize our Performance Plus, which is our suite of AI-powered automated ad solutions. And then also make sure you're enabling it early, even if you're not ready to action on it. This will capture the view history. So when you are ready to evaluate view within your model, you have an accurate view of data.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, Omnilux, I feel like I'm seeing everywhere. Quick side note, my mom is an amazing consumer, maybe one of America's best consumers. But she always texts me when she gets ads from brands. She's like, "Oh, is this a customer? Is this a customer?" But she was looking at both Omnilux and SoloWave. But I just think it's interesting because it's something that she's actually been. I'm just witnessing her customer journey for so long. That's been on multiple channels, but she's been in the consideration phase for months on end, and I think she's just about ready to make that purchase. So I'm excited to look into her customer journey within Northbeam. But really quickly, wanted to dive a little bit deeper. Olivia, for a performance marketer who's used to running everything on a last click world, we see this all the time with Northbeam customers. A lot of times they either come from last click land or platform reported attribution land. But how should you frame the expectations for Pinterest once CDV is actually turned on?
Yeah, I think we see this as kind of like staged out. So first start to compare some shorter windows like 7-day with longer windows like 30 to visualize that delayed effect without just over indexing on a single window. So start to see where that attribution might shift on campaigns that might have been undervalued in the past on Pinterest, but also cross channel. And then also make sure you're proactively educating your leadership teams. When many of the day-to-day teams we work with understand the value of a view, but some cases we've seen that mindset not always translate upward. So just making sure you're working with your Northbeam or your platform teams to really show how channel level ROAS, once verified views are included, what happens to it, because it is important to make sure you're taking in the full picture.
Awesome stuff. Now I wanted to loop in Pierre over on the Snap team. Snap was one of our first CDV integration partners and have been an amazing partner. But Snap plays a big role in initial discovery and new customer reach early in the journey. Hearing a lot of good things from our brands with some of the new formats you guys have been coming out with. But when deterministic views are layered into CDV, Snap's contribution often becomes much clearer inside a brand source of truth. But what are you hearing from some of our mutual advertisers when they start seeing this kind of rebalancing for Snap inside their source of truth?
Yeah, thanks, Zach. And if you allow me to go a little bit back in time, back to ATT times, to show how critical this new model is. What we observe, and I'm sure many people in this room, virtual room, observed, is a lot of brands shifted after signal deprecation to last click or click only models. And of course, everyone knew that click only was only showing a very partial set of the story, but obviously people were adapting to this change. And as advertisers started to layer in new sources of measurement, often referred as triangulation. You must have heard that many times in the last few years. So think about layering in, like Jacob was saying earlier, MMM, lifts, or think about the other metrics that Northbeam has been releasing. I've had a lot of conversation with customers and with also Zach here on the ROAS lag, the benchmark, the new customer visits, where Snap was performing incredibly well, but saying a very different story from the click-only model. And when it comes to CDV, and you can see here the example of Rage, we have many others. The deltas we are observing, the uplifts are tremendous. It's going from here, an example of plus 50% for Rage for the 1-day window to plus 600, like almost at plus 700% when it goes to 30 days. And when you think about the entire customer journey, it's essential, like previous platforms were saying, to incorporate these broader windows to really see the value of investing earlier in the journey. And it makes sense because Snap is a very view-based channel, and advertisers have been seeing this and the efficiency of the customer acquisition cost earlier in the journey. And if you think about the Rage example again, I see it a bit as a shift from black and white movies to colorful movies. Reach knew that was solid performance being driven by Snap, but now it shifts entirely the narrative. And the way I think about it is if you think about marginal cost, marginal value, it's really saying actually step one, once you shift from click to CDV, you see that actually you thought you were paying X for a given new customer, but actually the price is divided by 5. That's the real cost. You realize how cheap this customer acquisition was for all this time. And step two is if you start scaling, you observe that actually the marginal cost of acquisition is extremely low, much lower than what you thought. And that's because there's an opportunity to take some very saturated last click competition, typically from down the user journey, and to reallocate this in the upper funnel journey. And I will just say this at the end is advertisers can choose to increase spend totally, or if you can also think about a case where by maintaining the same total spend, for instance, you can make very smart reallocation and increase your total ROAS just by taking a little portion of this last click typical spend and reinvesting that earlier in the journey. I will also like just conclude saying like our sales team will follow up with some programs we have to test concretely and prove this in the real world.
Yeah, 100%. I think something we saw even before we released this model that was somewhat gave us a hunch that Snap was being largely underreported is we always saw a very strong new customer percentage, which is typically across our advertisers. Typically, I'd say about 95% of our customers, they optimize towards new customer ROAS or new customer CPA. They want to be rapidly acquiring net new customers and constantly filling their funnel. Snap always looked very strong on new customer and new visit percentage, signaling that it's driving a lot of upper funnel demand. But Pierre, we were speaking about this before, and I think you gave us an analogy of going from black and white to color. But can you give us an example of what changed for a brand's channel mix once that color showed up?
Yeah, of course. The way I see it, if you think about spend allocation per different channel from channel driving very strong upper funnel value early in the customer journey like us, or more like think about retargeting and search down in the user journey. I don't know if I'll do it the right way here, but the spend really follow this trend of massive percentage allocation down in the user journey. And here, like if you think about the share of attributed value, um, this bar chart, if you think about it, is completely different. It's really saying, look, take a bit of this from the lower funnel part and move this a little earlier, 15 days earlier, 30 days earlier, because these views are absolutely essential. And that to me is really the massive shift that we're observing. And it's making extremely essential recommendation in how you should allocate your spend. Again, everyone's looking for efficiency, for sustainable growth, especially for new customers. And the one thing I will add, like as you say, Zach, is these crazy numbers we were seeing very high of new customer visit typically are very helpful, but sometimes some finance tools were typically legacy and including elastic metrics. And even if a lot of marketing teams could talk about these metrics, now you have one single metric, one single view where you can holistically prove exactly this distribution of spend that is recommended by CDV.
Great stuff there. And then Mohit, before we dive deeper into our section here, Snap and TikTok both play huge roles in discovery. Are you seeing similar patterns on the new customer contribution when CDV is turned on?
Indeed. I mean, in addition to revenue and transaction related metrics, Zach, we also see improvements in the new customer acquisition related metrics. When we ran the beta with you guys, we saw 44% improvement in the new customer percentages, which leading to reduction in the new CAC, which is very important for the D2C advertisers that are leveraging both TikTok as well as Northbeam.
Great stuff. And that's a good segue into our dedicated section with the TikTok team. Last but certainly not least, TikTok was actually our first CDV partner and kind of kicked off the whole thing. So kudos to them. But super excited to have you join us today, Mohit. And again, from that 2025 benchmark report, TikTok, again, amazing results. We saw spend up 45% year over year. And actually, one-day revenue metrics growing at nearly the same rate. Really just highlights TikTok's strength as a discovery engine. But Mohit, let's talk us a little bit more in detail on how TikTok sees attribution evolving, how models like CDV help brands connect that discovery behavior to actual real business outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, my webinar, my panelists have already spoken about it, but I think the customer journey is evolving now, right? It's not linear anymore. It's not a straight line. Everyday users and customers are getting exposed to multiple devices on a daily basis, right? And as marketeers, our job is getting difficult. Traditionally, we have relied on last click to answer what's really working. But let's be honest, it's not telling the full story. A basic example, I see a TikTok ad on Monday, I discover the product and the brand, and then Friday I go to the website and make a purchase. In a last click scenario, TikTok will be getting zero credit for that purchase, even though it was a channel which drove it. And that's not an edge case. This is how majority of the conversions and purchases are happening today, especially in the cross session and the V3 environment. And when we speak to a lot of decision makers, CMOs, we keep on hearing these statements that, hey, I know TikTok works, but can you prove it to me in my dashboard so that my CFO agrees with me, right? So when we heard this, we wanted to solve for this, and that's why we are excited to partner with. We were the one who kickstarted this journey with Northbeam, and here we are today.
Awesome stuff. Want to dig a little bit deeper on the Olokai case study, but platform tests showed that TikTok was actually working, but some of the click-only attribution tools didn't reflect it. Could you dive a little bit deeper on what they saw?
Yeah, Aluka is a premium footwear brand, right? They were spending on TikTok, but TikTok was like a test channel for them. The whole idea was they were thinking that how to prove the impact of TikTok. They were relying on the clicks or the last click or the clicks only model. But then when we leaned in on the Northbeam CDV model, they were one of the early adopters. And once they started utilizing that for decision making, they saw close to 13% increase, 12.9% increase in new customer percentages, with 300% increase in TikTok's attributed revenue and 4 times increase in the ROAS, which was a game changer for them. And TikTok moved from just a test channel to an evergreen channel for them. And similar story across MacDougall as well. When they were leveraging last clicks, TikTok was severely undercredited. But once they made the shift to CDV model, they understood the impact of TikTok in this entire customer journey, and they were able to scale by more than 100% year on year.
There's some really impressive stats there. And Mohit, there's the age-old question of the CFO versus CMO debate. But a lot of our brands have years, maybe even a decade of last click data. And a lot of CMOs tell you TikTok works, but they're afraid to tell their CFO that only sees last click reports. What changes in that conversation when CFOs start seeing TikTok's deterministic views in Northbeam?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about the CDV model is it layers platform verified impression and views alongside the click. So now you have more data points to take those decisions. And when this data is in front of you, you are able to take not just budgeting decision, you're able to take even the campaign optimization decisions on a daily basis. For example, when we ran the beta with the more than 15 early adopters of the CDV model, we saw the transactions improve by more than 300% in the CDV model, which were not getting captured in the clicks only model. Similarly, the revenue grew by 354%, and the new customer percentages grew by 44%. So this data becomes very important for decision makers for budget allocation, such as CFOs and CMOs. And then when I talk to a lot of Northbeam advertisers, we hear this term that I'm leveraging Northbeam as a day trading platform to make my campaign optimization. So it's also very important that they leverage CDV to make those decisions, to understand the creatives, the targeting, the audiences, and adjust their bids accordingly, and then scale confidently on TikTok. This is where I think CDU plays a very huge role.
Great stuff, Mohit. And wanted to wrap things up with a little bit of Q&A. So we have some questions from the audience here, but thank you so much for everyone for joining. I wanted to wrap up with a few key takeaways here. So again, clicks aren't enough anymore. Click-based attribution doesn't tell the full customer journey. I think layering in deterministic views is one piece, but also layering in incrementality tests, MMM, it's all part of the measurement trifecta, the triangle offense, as we like to call it here. Deterministic views turn upper funnel exposure into something actually measurable, explainable, and actionable. And CDV isn't a replacement for MMM or experiments. Like I said, it's the connective tissue that makes everything else make sense. So if you haven't turned it on yet already within Northbeam, it's free for all of our customers. Anyone can turn it on. Reach out to our support team if you haven't already. And when the numbers move, don't panic. get curious. A lot of our customers are using this to make intra-channel decisions as well as making things more apples to apples across the board. But with that, I wanted to open up for a few questions here, starting with Meta. So, Cameron, how are you seeing advertisers combine click and view signals to improve measurement accuracy? And to go a bit deeper, how do you think new models like CDV will actually influence Meta's delivery algorithm?
Yeah, so I think that, as I mentioned in my section, is that this has been an ask for a long time. It's really important to advertisers. They know that views have an impact on their outcomes. So relying on models like Northbeam's CDV model allows them to have a better understanding of how clicks and views together are driving business outcomes. And then one thing that I'm really excited about is that we are working together to be able to leverage Northbeam's attributed measurement results to feed back into delivery optimization for advertisers. And I think this is something that really kind of completes the flywheel for advertisers to have a better understanding of their ad performance on Meta and compare that across campaigns. But then we can use their model from Northbeam as their source of truth for campaign performance to help improve their delivery optimization.
Yep. Super excited for that as well. Great stuff over there. And then question for the Snap team. Pierre, how do you think CDV data can help advertisers understand the impact of some of the new upper funnel Snap campaigns and new formats that you guys have released across their media mix?
Yeah, of course. We've deployed a lot more new inventory. Think about the chat, think about the spotlight and things like this. A lot of this inventory also is extremely efficient from a view-based perspective. And again, I would relate to what Mohit was saying earlier, is everyone from as a consumer understand the journey of click only doesn't really make sense. And a lot of it is being missed without the impression. And I think really like this CMO, CFO angle is a very illustrative because for this kind of new format, very impression based, there is a single input that can be taken using CDV. And what I really like about this model, it's combining a lot of the strengths of the different approaches that advertisers have been using. It's real time, it's deterministic. You can have a larger window, and obviously you have a very fair mix of impression and click. And as you were saying, Zach, earlier, the way you designed it, the guardrails you have in place to make sure like the duplication and things like this is essential. So I think it's really allowing to have this cross format and long-term efficiency, impact, and view in a single metric.
Awesome stuff. And there's a couple questions from the audience that I wanted to answer immediately here, but someone said, maybe I missed it, but I never saw an actual definition of what makes a view deterministic. Is there one? So the way I like to put this is Northbeam built a proprietary clean room. We are matching with these platforms on a mutually observed identifier, typically an order ID or a hashed email address. So it's all deterministically matched at the user level, and we're incorporating impressions from these various platforms alongside our click-based attribution. So we have some good documentation on our website on it, but hopefully that answers the question in terms of deterministic. Another question, how can you deduplicate view conversion data? Do you need to be optimizing for a view window to make this model work? So within this model, we have up to a 30-day attribution window. We connect into the e-commerce brand source of truth, typically a Shopify, but not limited to so. It could be Salesforce Commerce Cloud, a fully custom e-commerce platform, Stripe, and so on. We receive all those orders server to server, so we don't have the ability to over or under attribute from a total revenue standpoint. Everything reconciles to your source of truth. We're just deduplicating and fractionalizing credit. A lot of times can be jarring for a net new advertiser logging into Northbeam, seeing a number that's lower what they're used to seeing in platform. That's because of a couple things. We're fractionalizing each individual order. Sometimes there's 10 touch points of that order. Each touch point, depending on the model, but to simplify, could get 0.1 credit. So a bit of nuance there, but there's different views and windows. Some of our customers choose shorter windows if they're a shorter consideration phase. Some of them, maybe they sell $3,000 outdoor sofas. There's very little one-day click conversions on something like that. Some of those brands are even optimizing towards add to carts or email signups within Northbeam. So just wanted to go over a couple of those. A few other questions. For TikTok, Mohit, how do you see CDV actually shaping brands' creative effectiveness?
Yeah, I mean, when the measurement is clicks based only, right, the brands tend to over optimize for a small set of safe creatives, the one that are reliably driving clicks. But you need a volume of creatives to stay relevant, especially at the top of the funnel when you are discovering, exploring what is working. What CDB enables is confidence at that stage. When deterministic view data is included, brands can see the true impact of creatives. What it does is it changes your mindset from the creatives which are driving clicks to the creative themes which are consistently influencing downstream conversion. And we are in fact seeing advertisers also assessing the creator impact and payouts via the Northbeam results. With more assets in the market across creators and messages, brands can identify patterns with CDV instead of betting everything on a very few select ads.
Awesome stuff, Mohit. And that wraps us up, just about out of time here. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We hope you came away with a clear understanding of what CDB is. If you didn't, then I didn't do my job very well. But please feel free to reach out to you. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer any of these questions. I have all of your questions saved if we didn't get to them. But thanks again so much for joining us, and wanted to thank Cameron from Meta, Mohit from TikTok, Olivia from Pinterest, Pierre from Snap, Jacob from Vibe, and Lauren from Mountain. So thank you so much to my fellow guests here, and thanks so much everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, Northbeam, for having
Thank you
us.
for having us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Zach.